Dalvit. You were the first conductor of the orchestra. You started the orchestra. And you've gotten questions from the current orchestra conductor for this film. And these are some of the questions they asked you. And if you could just respond. First question, I'm going to read all 5 of the questions. And then you can think about your answers and we'll just talk about it. Why was the orchestra created? I'm sure you know that. Why? And how did you become the first conductor? What are some of the interesting memories you have when building the orchestra? What was the most inspirational music? How were the first audiences in the chapel? And what advice do you have for the present orchestra? Okay. So as your daughter, I've heard a lot of stories over the years. And I've heard why the orchestra was created, and it's very interesting. Why and how?
Well, I really would like to talk in this 10 minutes that we have about some of the memories. When the orchestra first started, finding funding was always a problem. Finding a home for the orchestra would be another one. We ended up, because of the vocational school, allowed us to come and practice there. And one of the memories there is they had an open house in the vocational school, and I was conducting a very vigorous number, and it needed a good cymbal crash in it. And I didn't hear it go, and so I looked at the percussion section. I said, we have to have a cymbal crash. And this fellow was standing back there among them. I said, pick up the cymbal. Give that man a cymbal. And I said, I'll give you the cue when it's going to come in. So we got, and the music got stronger and stronger. I gave him a big cue. He crashed the cymbals right on time. And we went on, and then at the end of that piece, I walked back to the percussion section, and I said, oh, that was good. Where's the fellow? I said, do you know him? And he said, no, he was a student that came in, that was walking around and came in from the back, and he was just standing there.
So he was someone that just wandered in.
That's it, he wandered in and then disappeared.
So he became famous for a brief moment as
That's
a cymbal
right.
player.
Man, it was kind of fun because the orchestra got a laugh out of it, but the cymbal crash was in the right place. Anyway, I also remember we had an English teacher that was also an excellent pianist, and his name was Harry Wolf. I still remember, and we used to do run-out concerts. We ran a concert to Clinton, and he was playing the Rhapsody in Blue by Gershwin, and I had picked up my baton, got ready, looked at him, and was going to give the downbeat. Next thing I knew, he was standing beside me. And I said, what are you doing here? You should be back at the piano. And he said, I can't remember the first chord. So, I've had pianists, though, that have tried to find the first chord, too, before they get started. Anyway, another thing that was interesting is that they had ballet close by in Rockford Symphony in the city, and for some reason I felt that I would like to do ballet, and so that was the beginning of a career that I would do well in, but I didn't know the talent was there. So we would do the Carnival of Animals, and for several years they choreographed it, and we did just for the young people to come and see the ballet. So that was kind of a nice thing to introduce. Various people played in the orchestra. I remember the Dogan Farm. One of them was Dan Goldsmith, who was a minister, and he was in between jobs, more or less, and he played the string bass, long, tall, gangly fellow, very nice man, and he would come and play with the bass section. And Marshall Miller, I don't know if you remember Marshall Miller, was a fellow that was well educated, but he took up farming and lumbering, cutting down forests. And in fact, I even helped him cut wood one time, and he played the string bass. but to bring up the string basses, the other symphony in Rockford was had string basses, and for some reason, all four of those string basses would come to rehearsal. Well, you know, in Wisconsin, the weather is terrible. I mean, in the wintertime, and no matter what kind of weather was, 6 foot of snow, they would be there with their hats kicking off the icicles and everything. And one was a doctor, one was a farmer, and I forgot what the other two. One was a student, but they were so loyal. And then after the rehearsal, we'd all go out and have a pizza together. One of the things I also remember is...
wait, I'm interrupting, because I
Yeah.
remember being neighbors with David Collins, and he was in the orchestra from the beginning,
Yes.
right? And I remember as a child sleeping over at his house while you and my mom and David would go to rehearsal, but right by his bed was a radio that was connected to the fire department, because he was a volunteer fire person. And I remember hearing that, waiting for you to come and get
Yeah.
us to go back home, but listening with fascination to this radio
Yes.
that was by his bed. And David would play the trombone,
Yeah.
and it was fun.
He was our first president, and actually I think there'll be a photo that shows David playing the trombone when we were in the Symphony Fair days, and that was another important fundraiser for us. People would set up different kinds of booths, and one was set up in selling milk for 10 cents a glass in those days. I remember there was a calliope that went through the main town and playing, and we had we had the youth orchestra playing there, and Pat had that a great influence on the strings that we had available, because she had a string orchestra.
So the whole town was or the whole Main Street was...
The whole Main Street was there, and
so all the people in the different stores also had booths up?
Yes.
This was funding for the symphony.
That's right, yeah.
Symphony Fair days.
It was an annual event. And David would play, we had a Hungry Five.
Was that the name of a group?
That was the group, and we played polkas.
Why were they called the Hungry Five?
Well, that's a question I can't answer.
Have to ask David?
They were all hungry, I guess. I think that was the name that you used for a polka band. It was played polka music, the Hungry Five. Although it sounds like a rock group now. Anyway, there was a connection with the orchestra had a connection with the college, and became more and more involved with the college, and you could get credit for it. And Bob Ron was our concert master, and he was in the music department, played very well. And we drew from all kinds of cities. We had an older gentleman who played viola, and he came all the way from Madison, that's 50 miles away, in all kinds of weather. Then there was another man, and I can't remember where he came, but he came from out of town. His name was Gus, I remember, and he was quite old. And the day of the concert, he came, and we were going to play at a high school in, I think it was in South Beloit. So it began to snow, and everybody couldn't go because it was getting taller and taller, the snow. And so we called everybody, we thought. But I said, to Pat, I said, I think we better check to make sure that everybody knows there's no concert. Sure enough, we got down there. There's this old man, really elderly, and always came to rehearsals, no matter what. Here he was, trying to get out of his car to get to play the cello with us. We sent him back and felt badly that he had made an effort to come down. A lot of my friends were just people that I had played with high school, and they were in the orchestra. Harold Deal played the clarinet, and we had an oboist, and the drummers, the timpanist was Eugene Bornstead, who was a teacher at that time. So it was made up of a lot of people around that area. One of the things I want to make mention, though, is that they all played for nothing. There was no fee because there was no money. And consequently, at that time, Petrillo was the head of the music union, and he set up a fund in which orchestras like ours could get funds if the players would sign their checks back. And sure enough, it was called the Music Trust Fund. And so they got the check, and then they would all pass, and that was our income for a long time. The audiences I really can't really with great appreciation talk to the audiences, because we didn't know how many people were going to show up, and it was always filled every time. And of course, I was young enough that it didn't matter if they came or not. I loved to conduct, and consequently, but they were very loyal people. I should say that we had one person who was deaf, a good friend of the family's, and she came and she couldn't hear, but she'd like to see me conduct. I thought it was a kind of interesting thing. And let's see, what other things were there?
Why was the orchestra created in the first place?
Well, I owe a great deal. This is a way to end our interview, because Pat was a vital part. My wife, my first wife.
Your only wife.
My only wife. And yeah, I think it was because of her ideas that I should continue as a conductor, and she urged me, and she also had a string orchestra, and guess who got to conduct it?
Well, I remember being raised thinking that everybody had to play the violin.
That's right.
That there was no choice.
But behind all the scenes, the conducting I did, which was worldwide, and the probably the greatest talents of all the 20th century, she urged me on and to say that I can do it, get out and do it, and I owe a lot to her. I also learned something about intonation. Intonation was a primary attitude to have, and because of her violin teaching, I took double stops and played on the violin and so forth, and got an ear for good intonation. I must say that that's not always followed nowadays. I can hear a lot of things that are out of tune in other orchestras, and I say to people that might be watching, if you're a singer, you should have a teacher that's also a violinist, so that they can really get in a pitch, because I hear a lot of singers sing out of tune, and you don't want to say too much to them if they are, because it gets pretty personal. And it was just recently, actually, I heard of one singing, and I wanted to tell her, because she was a finalist in one of the competitions. And I said, should I say anything to her? But I thought it's too personal to say that these notes you should try to get in pitch for them. And but I learned to play all the instruments too. Mm-hmm. I took a course and was hired by the Milton College. There was a small liberal arts college nearby, and my job was to teach all the instruments, including percussion and trumpet, trombone. And I was one of the first, and all the woodwinds. In fact, I had an oboe player that I taught at that point, and it ended up in the, I think it was the Oregon Symphony, as an English horn player.
It's Seattle, I think.
Seattle, I think, yeah.
He just started donating to your arts festival here in Canada. He just all of a sudden sent you some money and said, put this towards your festival, and he had just retired his first oboist to the Seattle Symphony.
Yeah, so. No, it was wonderful to see my student,
Yes.
We talked about literature mostly with him, but I've looked at the literature of that Dr. Tomaro has been having for the orchestra, the Lloyd Civic Janesville Orchestra. It's a very fine orchestra literature that he's going through. He's very capable, and he's a very good orchestra conductor, and I must say they're in good hands. And with that, I think I'll end the interview.
Thank you.
I thought you were going to say most flute players